Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another video. It is Thursday morning and it's pretty nice. It's going to be a nice day. If you only watch this channel for summer wells content, then today is not your day. Come back tomorrow. For those of you who would prefer me to cover other cases, well, this is your day. If that's you, I hope you've gone back through my playlists, both on this channel and on my other channel, Michelle Walks, where I cover a wide range of cases, from historical cases to active missing persons cases. So go and check all of that out. Today, I'm going to discuss the unlikely disappearance of 2-year-old DeOrr Kunz Jr, who went missing on the 10th of July 2015 from the Timber Creek campground, a very, very rural, rugged area of Idaho. DeOrr disappeared under the noses of 4 adults: his parents, his great-grandfather, and his great-grandfather's friend. So first of all, let's talk about the people. Let's talk about the day. Let's consider some theories, and alongside that, I'm going to give you my opinion. Let's do it. DeOrr Kunz Jr, 2 years old, a bright little boy, a little bit small for his age, according to his dad, but fast, could run like the wind, very friendly child, and he was very much a mama's boy. Both of his parents have said consistently, it's one of the things they have been consistent about, that he would never have wandered away. But that is one of the theories of what happened to little DeOrr, so that's going to come up again later. So DeOrr and his family lived in Idaho Falls, which was about 2.5 to 3 hours away from the Timber Creek campground. The family were campers. Vernal, dad, actually, in an interview much later said he wasn't keen on camping, but he went along with it because Jessica's family enjoyed it. As a youngster, Jessica had been to the Timber Creek campground many times with her grandfather, Bob, and it was Bob's idea, allegedly, to go camping this day, and it was a pretty rushed affair. They didn't really plan it. It was one of those spontaneous things. They decided to just pack up and go camping just for a couple of days. DeOrr's mother is Jessica Mitchell, and she was engaged but not married, not that it matters, to DeOrr's dad, Vernal Kunz. He's actually DeOrr Sr, but known as Vernal, so let's call him that to avoid any confusion. They were both 26, I believe, at the time that DeOrr disappeared. And then there's Jessica's grandfather, DeOrr's great-grandfather, Bob Walton, and he was the camper of the family. He was in his late 70s, his health was failing him. He was actually on an oxygen tank almost permanently, and he had his oxygen tank with him on this camping trip. He actually died in 2019, so Bob is no longer with us to, give us any updates on the story. And then we've got Bob's friend, Isaac Reinwand. They're an unlikely combination. Isaac's a young man, only in his 30s, but he used to do odd jobs for Bob, and they became friends. They had things in common. They liked fishing. At short notice, Isaac decided to come along as well. I think Bob invited him. Vernal and Jessica didn't know Isaac. They'd never met him before. In later interviews, they said he was kind of weird, but we'll talk about that when the time comes in a little while. So the 4 of them and little DeOrr set off around 6 p.m. in 2 vehicles. So there was Vernal and Jessica and little DeOrr in one vehicle, and then Bob and Isaac in another. Set off around 6. They stopped for gas and supplies. This is 2 separate occasions on the way there. And they said they arrived about 9. There has been some discrepancies in that arrival time, but let's just go with 9. The time they arrived, I don't think really matters to the overall story. But they said they set up a campfire, got all the supplies together, and then they were all tired, so they all went to bed. And they woke up the following morning, had breakfast, and then Bob and Isaac went fishing. It's one of the things that they enjoyed. It's one of the things that they planned to do this weekend. So while Bob and Isaac went fishing, Vernal and Jessica decided to travel to the nearest town, a small town called DeOrr, about 7 miles away. They took baby DeOrr, and they said he was in high spirits. He was running around in the store, you know, not a care in the world. And they said they got back to the camp around 1 p.m. So it's a very lazy morning, very laid back. And by the time they got back to camp, Isaac and Bob had finished fishing and were back there at the camp. So Vernal and Jessica decided they wanted to go and explore. They wandered down to the creek, only about 50 yards away from where they were camping. And this is where the stories start to become very confused. This is where the stories start to conflict. The first story was that DeOrr stayed with his great-grandpa and they saw some minnows, and Vernal went back to the camp, only 50 yards away, to get DeOrr because he would like the minnows. Vernal said to Grandpa Bob, "Where's DeOrr?" And he said, "I thought he was with you." So Grandpa Bob apparently didn't know that he was the babysitter. In a much later interview, when a private investigator firm got involved and law enforcement got very suspicious, they put the family, all of them, under surveillance. And a couple of guys went undercover and befriended Isaac. Now, Isaac perhaps had a learning difficulty, was quite naive, and he told them that Grandpa Bob was not babysitting DeOrr at all. He'd gone to sleep in his camper because he was tired after the fishing trip. So had Vernal and Jessica just assumed that DeOrr would stay at the camp? Had they assumed he was following them? They believe he was abducted. Now, Vernal is very outspoken, very vocal, right from the outset. And I'll play you a clip of his and Jessica's interview with East Idaho News a few days after DeOrr disappeared.
2:26 is when was it 2:26?
It was 2:36 when I called.
It was 2:36 is when she called, and I was in the truck hauling down to the road to try and get service because I didn't think one bar would get it. So she got very, very lucky. I was blessed that she was able to get service because I didn't want to try and risk getting halfway through my talking to the 911 and have it cut off. So I went down to where I knew I could get a little service about a half mile down the road. We searched after about 20 minutes and in a dead panic, not knowing where he was in such a small area and never being there, I knew I was in trouble. So we decided to call search and rescue, and that's when I drove down. She tried getting a signal out. As soon as I got a hold of them, they told me that she was on the other line with them, and they had our location, and they were on our way. Where it's at is, I thought it would be perfect to go camping there because it's enclosed by walls of mountains, and there's not much space around there that he could go. And our biggest concern was the creek, which was knee deep, a few feet wide, but he's a little guy. They finally, yesterday, we were able to put that to rest, and Lehigh County Sheriff, Sheriff Dave, and the rest of the sheriffs have put out that they assured me there is 100% chance that he is not anywhere in that water, around that water. They have torn that creek upside down and in and out. Divers have gone through wetsuits, and along with the helicopter. That was the world's most advanced search and rescue helicopter volunteered out of Montana.
So he was just kind of playing, and you guys were doing your thing, and then you noticed.
He was playing with
my grandfather.
Grandpa. He was getting ready for a nap. I say it was almost, by that time it was almost 2, and he usually takes his nap. We decided we're going to go a little exploring. He was going to be good with Grandpa by the campfire. We weren't more than probably 50 yards away in 10 minutes. But the time I seen him to the point I figured out he was gone. And I come back up in the creek, and I've actually seen there were some things down by the little minnows that I thought he would just love. So when I come back up to get him, and I yelled over to Grandpa, where's little DeOrr? He immediately shocked. He says, he came up to you because it's such a small area. That's what a lot of people, they don't understand, is they just assume, how could you let your kid out of your sight? This area is pretty well blocked in, and you can see, there's no way you couldn't not see him in what we thought. And in just in a split second, your whole world is upside down and vanished. There's not a trace found. That's the other reason why this has been called in the news as a suspension, because it is not a suspension, but there's not a single trace of him. This child loses stuff. He's 2, almost 3. Anybody who has a child in that age range knows. They leave trails. They lose stuff. Nothing. Anything. There's just nothing. And that's where we're starting to move is there's a possibility that he may be with somebody, and that's what's giving us hope that it's a bad thing that he will be not with us right now, but it also means that there is a good chance that he is alive and with somebody. So we are trying every aspect we can, any aspect we can.
Is that what your gut tells you, as his
Yes.
father?
As his father, I believe, and I think after being up there, and a lot of people agree with me, a lot, that he is no longer up the mountain anymore. The searching advances they used and was just very thorough for miles.
So what happened to baby DeOrr? In a recent interview, this was in the last few months, the sheriff is still quite non-committal, still quite open-minded about what did happen to baby DeOrr. And here's a clip from him.
Have the stories between the 4 people up there been straight? Been consistent with each other?
To a large degree. There's been some inconsistencies, which isn't particularly unusual. The timeline that we have, it doesn't disprove that initial story. It doesn't necessarily prove it either, but we were able to put a pretty decent one together. But so then you're kind of in that limbo stage.
In the 6 years since this happened, have the parents continued to cooperate with you?
Yeah, they're accessible. If I need to talk to them or ask a question, we're able to do that.
How about Isaac?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Grandpa Bob has passed away, for those unfamiliar, but up until his death, was he available? And
yeah.
Did he wander away? Even though his parents swear down that he wouldn't. He's only two, only a little guy. Did he just get bored with Grandpa Bob? Was Grandpa Bob asleep, as Isaac said? And DeOrr wandered away and had a head start because they were away longer than they said. Now remember, this creek with the minnows was only 50 yards away from where the camp was. And Vernal is insistent that you could see all around it. So they had eyes on DeOrr the whole time. But if they'd had eyes on DeOrr the whole time, they'd have seen him wandering away, wouldn't they? Unless they were down in the creek without eyes, without visibility on the camp. So they said he was only missing like 20 minutes before they called the police. They'd done a cursory search around, didn't think he could wander that far. Visibility could be seen all around. Vernal said it was safe because this campground is kind of like encased in mountains. But if that's the case, if someone had crept up on the camp, was watching from a higher vantage point and crept upon the camp and took baby DeOrr, could mind read the 4 adults that were there and stole baby DeOrr, well, if they had eyes on DeOrr the whole time, how could a person creep up and steal him?
There's never been any sort of clothing material found, or leather boots, or bones, or teeth?
Not yet.
So, I'm sure you've been asked this. I'll ask you again. What do you think happened?
I don't know what happened. I mean, you have those. Was he abducted? Was he a victim of, some type of foul play from 1 or 4 or more? Or was it some type of a nature take? And by that, I mean, he could have slipped out of there and we just failed to find him. He could have moved out a little ways, encountered a large predator. I guess I would say it's one of those 3.
As I always say in these missing child cases, children can do the strangest of things. They can do what the parents would least expect. But there was extensive searches. Every piece of equipment that they could get their hands on, they used in the search of baby DeOrr. So you kind of think if he'd wandered away, he would have been found. He may not have been found alive, but he would have been found. One of the other theories, in addition to stranger abduction and wandering away, is animal attack. Now, there was bear and wolf activity around the Timber Creek area, but bears and wolves don't generally come right into someone's camp, especially if there's a campfire. They're not going to come up directly into the camp and steal a child. But if DeOrr wandered just a little way away and there was a hungry bear or a hungry wolf, possible. But like with the wandering away scenario, evidence would have been found. DeOrr was wearing cowboy boots that were 2 sizes too big for him. So if a stranger had picked him up and carried him away with their hand over the mouth, his boots would have fallen off. Likewise, if a bear or a wolf had attacked him and tried to carry him off, surely he would have screamed. A bear or a wolf doesn't put their hands over your mouth when they're carrying you away. I just find all of these scenarios really, really, really unlikely. I think stranger abduction, to me, in my opinion, is the least likely under those circumstances. Wandering away, getting lost, getting turned around, instead of coming back to the camp after his little excursion, he went in the wrong direction. How far could a 2-year-old get? Well, you'd be surprised. They could probably get 1 mile, 2 miles, maybe. But the search fanned out that far. So again, he may not have been found alive, but surely there'd have been some sign, even if it was just the cowboy boots. But they didn't find any sign. So that leads us to homicide. Now, I don't think, in my opinion, we're talking about intentional homicide. We're not talking about murder here. But the parents have been in the spotlight since the early days. Now, they've had a few private investigators kind of come and offer their services. One such firm was that of Philip Klein out of Texas, and he has been very, very outspoken. He's still doing interviews with people about this situation. There was $20,000 raised, actually $29,000 raised, but where the other $9,000 went, we don't know. Sidebar, very relevant sidebar, Vernal and Jessica were having financial problems at the time of DeOrr's disappearance. They couldn't pay their rent. And this GoFundMe that raised $29,000 to pay Philip Klein, Philip received 20 grand. 9 grand disappeared. But Philip Klein has been very outspoken, and he believes that the parents know. The parents know exactly what happened to baby DeOrr. So here's a clip from Philip Klein.
So what we did was we went back and we rebuilt this case from ground zero out, and we interviewed probably over 150 witnesses, followed up on I think it's 300 tips. We have declared it now an accidental death / homicide. That's what we suspect, and we base it on a few things. And I want to go over those things very clearly, Nate, because I'm giving you this exclusive interview, and I want to make sure that it gets out to the public because there's a lot of public conjecture at this point. I want to announce for the first time that we, law enforcement and the FBI, has interviewed DeOrr Kunz, the father of DeOrr, 9 times. He's been given 9 interviews. None of the stories he has told has matched or has even been verified. And that is very disturbing for us as investigators. He's given us a story. He's given us a timeline. When we go out and we try to prove up or actually just basically prove up simple things in the timeline, it falls apart, and it falls apart quickly.
Vernal and Jessica, once Philip turned on them and believed that they were involved, they tried to sue him, tried to get the 20 grand that had been paid back. But it was laughed at at court because Philip Klein was only doing the job that he was paid to do. Vernal and Jessica didn't pay him. This was GoFundMe money. So why would Philip Klein have to pay back 20 grand to the people whose 20 grand it wasn't. So why does Philip Klein believe that they know exactly what happened to baby DeOrr? Now, there's a number of huge red flags. Jessica and Vernal failed polygraphs. Not just failed a little bit, but failed absolutely dismally. And on several occasions. Different polygraph machines, different polygraphers, and they failed every single time. Every single time. Now, I don't take much stock in polygraphs. They can be unreliable. In my opinion, like in the recent Michael Vaughan case, you know, Tyler Vaughan has failed 2 polygraphs, and I think that's because he feels guilty. He feels responsible. And ultimately, you know, Michael was under his care when he went missing, so there is that level of responsibility there. Not a criminal one, but there is a level of responsibility there. And perhaps it's the same for Jessica and Vernal, that they feel guilty that their child was under their care, and that's why they keep failing polygraphs. So I don't take much stock in that, but there are other more pertinent red flags. The timeline is confusing. There's more minutes in the timeline than they say there is. So that's a problem. They've told varying stories. That's a problem. Isaac tells a different story. And to be honest, Isaac, in the eyes of many, has been the most honest of them all. He's a guy who, you know, he's a friend of Bob, but Bob's now deceased. So he doesn't need to defend that family. And it could genuinely be the case that he doesn't know what happened to baby DeOrr.
What do you think happened to baby DeOrr?
I have no idea. Maybe it was an accident or something. I don't know.
Do you think he's still alive?
I don't have a comment on that.
Do you think Jessica had anything to do with his disappearance?
Ooh, I'm not going to comment on that either.
Why not?
I just feel like I just want to stay neutral in this situation, you know. Don't want to point fingers. I don't think it's nice or it's right.
Do you think Vernal DeOrr had anything to do with baby DeOrr's disappearance?
I have no idea.
And what about Bob?
Bob? I don't know if he'd do. All I know is DeOrr was up there with us. We were camping. Next thing you know, he was gone. And there was 4 adults up there. And for some reason, none of us know what went down. Somebody does, but I can't point fingers at somebody when I don't know, you know?
In a much later interview, Isaac said no one had eyes on baby DeOrr because Grandpa Bob was asleep in his camper and they all went to the creek. But one of the disturbing things that Isaac talked about was that a cooler, a big cooler, you know, like a camping cooler, disappeared. So was baby DeOrr dead, was put in a cooler and transported away? I think that's one of the most likely scenarios, in my opinion. I mean, they're all unlikely, but I think, in my opinion, that is one of the most likely scenarios. Because this search was extensive. They searched the creek, the reservoir, sonar, divers, not just on one occasion, but on several. Heat-seeking technology, there's masses and masses of ground searching. Every single summer, they go back to that area and search again. So either all of that has missed baby DeOrr, or he's not there and he was transported away. So how could he have been transported away? Well, there has been some cadaver dog hits. Now, there's been some cadaver dog hits that were found not to be anything to do with DeOrr, but it's interesting that allegedly signs of blood were found on Vernal's truck, kind of on the rear of Vernal's truck. So one possible theory is that while Grandpa Bob and Isaac were fishing, Vernal accidentally ran over baby DeOrr and killed him. And that's where the blood on the truck came from. But he panicked, perhaps because he'd been drinking. Now, this is all very much alleged and just a theory. Possibly been drinking, panicked because in his job as a truck driver, he knew if there was even a hint that he'd committed vehicular manslaughter, he would have been fired. Already they've got financial problems, and hey presto, that's where they decided to cover it up. Put DeOrr in the cooler, drive him away. And remember, they went to the store 7 miles away, and they could have dropped him off anywhere on the route there. You see, the parents claim that there's lots of witnesses that saw DeOrr. You know, he was running around in the aisles and people spoke to him. But there's no witnesses. There's no witnesses whatsoever who saw baby DeOrr at that store in Ladore, or even on the way there, which has led some to believe that he never made it to the campground and the whole trip was a setup. You know, he died in their home and they decided to, you know, put this last minute camping trip together and to make this story believable that he'd gone missing. I believe it's the opinion of law enforcement that he did make it to the campground. Their home was searched, you know, forensically searched, and there was no cadaver dog activity there, no signs of any, you know, blood or anything there. Given that there was dog hits at the campground but not in the home, I think it's more likely that he did make it to the campground, but he died at that campground. And his parents panicked and covered it up, because unlike some cases where hiding a body would have been difficult at short notice, not so the case with baby DeOrr, because this is an incredibly rural area and they did leave the camp to go to the store. So if DeOrr had sadly been killed unintentionally, but still, by Vernal or even Jessica driving, we don't know. Then they had all that time to go to the store, drop him off somewhere on the way to that store and come back. There's easily enough time in kind of that morning's schedule for that to have occurred and for them to have got away with it, got him off the campground, and that's why he can't be found. He's there in that expanse of rural Idaho, but he's not at that campground or within a couple of miles of that campground, and that's why he hasn't been found. That's just one theory, and in my opinion, it's one of the most likely theories. You know, all of them are unlikely, but that's one of the most likely theories in my opinion. Vernal and Jessica were declared suspects in 2016, but there's been no charges, no arrests, nothing. As I said, Philip Klein is still very vocal about this, absolutely adamant that there's so many red flags in this case that the parents have to have been involved in some way. But what happened to all of them? Well, Jessica and Vernal, a few months after DeOrr went missing, they split up, and Jessica's married. They're both with new partners. They've both left the state, and allegedly they no longer speak to each other. So there's that. Grandpa Bob died of health complications in 2019. And Isaac, the most honest of them all, who incidentally they all of them, Vernal, Jessica and Grandpa Bob, have tried to kind of point their fingers at Isaac. You know, he's the weird guy. But he's not a suspect. Vernal and Jessica are. You know, just all started to turn on each other. But Jessica and Vernal, even though they've split up and they don't speak anymore, They've never turned on each other. If it was Vernal that was perhaps driving and was responsible for DeOrr's death, surely she'd get a deal, you know, some kind of immunity from prosecution. But maybe not. Maybe it's too much of a risk for Jessica. But yeah, Isaac is now married, living his life, trying to get on with things. And baby DeOrr is still missing. And I'm going to give the last word to the sheriff, who knows the area very well. So I'll say goodbye here. Goodbye from Miss Cassie Springer, who's very dirty. Miss Cassie Springer! And Miss Tillington. Bye, guys. Here's the sheriff.
I've never forgotten what you told me that the first time we met, that the mountains have a secret.
They can keep a secret.
They can keep a secret. The mountains can keep a secret. But usually that secret eventually comes out. Or not.
Well, 1975 to 2007.
I guess this is one of the cases that you're hoping is solved by the time you decide to retire.
I hope it's solved this summer. But, you know, I've thought that a lot of times. But
what else do you want people to know?
We haven't given up. You know, he's a little boy that went missing. He was lost. And when someone's lost, you look for him. So we'll continue to investigate, and we'll continue to search for him.